Taro Sakamoto, the guy to which the series is named after, is unsurprisingly pretty strong. He's demonstrated some incredible feats of power and speed, shown off his skill in fights countless times, and has ultimately cemented himself in the assassin world as the greatest of all time. So today, I figured we'd take an empirical look at Sakamoto's abilities to find out just how strong he truly is. For this video, I'll be rating Sakamoto's strength, speed, durability/endurance, hacks, and IQ, all out of a max of 10 in order to get a holistic sense of Sakamoto's power. Also, I will be scaling current Sakamoto after his 5 years of retirement, and will only be pulling feats from the past when and if they're relevant and are not affected by Sakamoto going into retirement. With that being said, let's take a look at Sakamoto's strength. Sakamoto has shown several times that his strength is absolutely monstrous. In his fat form, he's able to keep the top half of Tokyo Tower from falling over just by pulling on it with a cable, and Tokyo Tower as a whole weighs around 4,000 tons, so if we're being generous and say that the top half weighs just as much as the bottom half, Sakamoto would be supporting around 2,000 tons by himself. This level of strength is monstrous, and it's not even taking into account various other factors that we've seen can massively improve his strength. In Sakamoto's fight against Kanaguri, we see that in his fat form, he's not really able to damage Kanaguri. Even when Kanaguri is off guard, Sakamoto's punches don't actually do any visible damage to him. However, once Sakamoto enters his skinny form, he's able to make Kanaguri bleed with a single punch. Of course, we later find out that all the damage Sakamoto did was actually fake, but the fact that Sakamoto entering his skinny form was outputting enough power to make Kanaguri apply the makeup indicates that Sakamoto entering his skinny form is still an overall increase in power despite the decrease in weight. Lastly, we see that Sakamoto being bloodlusted is also an increase to his strength, although the increase is vague and unquantifiable. The best indicator of this increase is when Uzuki threatens his daughter, to which Sakamoto tries to punch him and causes destruction in the environment. Before this, he was using a pen, so not much destruction was made, but the story seems to imply that he got stronger with bloodlust. Overall, if we're looking at the series as a whole and comparing him to other powerhouses like Hyo and Takamura, I'd give Sakamoto an 8.5 out of 10 for strength in his skinny form, and a 7.5 to 8 out of 10 for strength in his fat form. Next up, we have to take a look at Sakamoto's speed. Once again, Sakamoto has shown several times that his speed is insane, although it heavily depends on whether or not he's in his skinny or fat form. In his fat form, Sakamoto is still fast, but a lot of other characters are either relative to him or just flat out blitzing him. He gets perception blitzed by Uzuki when they first meet at the JAA base, and even while bloodlusted, he isn't actually able to land a hit on Uzuki. Later in his fight with Kanaguri, Sakamoto gets blitzed again as Kanaguri runs up on him and slashes him. His speed at this point just isn't enough to catch Kanaguri off guard. Nearly all of his attacks were dodged or blocked. It isn't until Kanaguri loses motivation that Sakamoto is able to properly outclass him in speed, and that doesn't last for long as Kanaguri gets another camera and goes back to blitzing Sakamoto. One of his better speed feats in his fat form is keeping up with Uzuki and Nagumo when attacking Takamura, and even being able to dodge one of Takamura's slashes after punching his sword. But keep in mind that both Nagumo and Uzuki are injured at this point, with Nagumo having just fought Gaku and Uzuki has a hole in his lung. This does change, however, when Sakamoto enters his skinny form. In his fight with Kanaguri, Sakamoto goes from being blitzed by a remotivated Kanaguri to blitzing him. Kanaguri literally thinks to himself that Sakamoto is insanely fast. We even see this in Sakamoto's fight with Boiled, where he goes from being unable to land a single hit on Boiled to blitzing him repeatedly, also making Boiled note that he's really fast. And in Sakamoto's fight with Takamura, Sakamoto has to enter his skinny form and fully lock in just to keep up with Takamura, indicating that his skinny form is a significant increase to his speed. So for fat Sakamoto, I'd probably give his speed like a 7 out of 10, while his skinny form's speed gets an 8 to 8.5 out of 10. For Sakamoto's durability scaling, we can draw most of the conclusions from his strength scaling. Since Sakamoto isn't tearing his body apart to punch, we can safely say that he can take the attacks on the level that he outputs. For something more in depth, we see that Sakamoto takes a punch from Hyo that sends him flying through the hospital, but it's pretty likely that Hyo was holding back in this instance. We also see that, despite Kanaguri's speed blitzing him, the attacks themselves weren't massively damaging Sakamoto, so his durability still scales to Kanaguri's attacks even when Kanaguri is locked in. Overall, we know more about what Sakamoto can't tank compared to what he can, so I'm just going to list those off. He can't tank a slash from Takamura, he can't take a hit from Chain, and he can't tank a direct slash from Kanaguri's director board. Additionally, I don't think Sakamoto's durability is too heavily affected by him entering a skinny form, so I'll just be giving it 1 rating. Sakamoto's endurance, however, is honestly really impressive. We see that heavy injuries, while definitely debilitating, don't stop Sakamoto from moving, and in some cases, don't affect his stats at all. Despite taking a slash from Takamura that cut through his bulletproof apron, he was still able to get up and fight, going on to take another off-guard slash from Takamura before attempting to drag himself and Nagumo out of the museum. After being cut by Kanaguri, the bloodlust amp Sakamoto got was enough to allow him to kick Kanaguri across the stage, and Sakamoto was more than willing to continue throwing hands had Akira not intervened. Lastly, in his encounter with Uzuki at the JAA base, even though Sakamoto was repeatedly getting perception blitzed, he never stops fighting, and his bloodlust amp once again overpowers any damage he took. He even tanks the building level explosion after this and comes out relatively fine. Because of this, I'd give Sakamoto's durability/endurance a joint ranking of yet another 8 out of 10. Now it's time to take a look at Sakamoto's hacks. As a series, Sakamoto Days doesn't really do the whole magical power system thing, so I struggle to consider a lot of abilities hacks since they usually stem from a character's skills or proficiencies. However, the best way I could categorize this was in hacks, so we're taking a look at Sakamoto's ability to use anything as a weapon. As stated by Rion and shown by Sakamoto himself multiple times, Sakamoto's ability to use anything available to him as a weapon is sort of his whole thing, and is likely what made him the greatest assassin of all time. Whether it be stickers, pencil lead, passports, or suitcases, Sakamoto can make it into a weapon, oftentimes using it better than the actual weapons of the people he goes up against. There is a limit to this though, as seen when Sakamoto just tries to shoot Takamura with a gun instead of trying to incapacitate him with some random object. In general though, Sakamoto has demonstrated extreme proficiency with everyday items to the point that it's actually absurd, and very few characters rival the sheer amount of versatility Sakamoto has, so his hacks gets a solid 9.5 out of 10. Lastly, we have to take a look at Sakamoto's intelligence. Once again, this ranks pretty high. Sakamoto had a legitimately solid plan when fighting Takamura as he attempted to wear down Takamura's katana instead of fighting him directly, which would have worked if Takamura didn't happen to be him. Outside of that, Sakamoto's shown some pretty extensive knowledge about the body's vital points and weak spots, which comes in handy when he needs to quickly inflict damage or help someone recover from an injury. That being said, Sakamoto definitely isn't the smartest character ever and has been tricked twice, once when he failed to notice that Kanaguri's blood was just makeup, and another when he legitimately believed that Nagumo had lost to Gaku and fell for the disguise. You could also argue that Sakamoto's ability to use anything as a weapon plays into his fight IQ though, so he is by no means dumb. Overall, Sakamoto with his combat experience, knowledge of the body, and general fight IQ gets a solid 8.5 out of 10. Adding up all the scores for Fat Sakamoto, he ranges from a 40.5 to 41 out of 50, and for Skinny Sakamoto, he ranges from a 42.5 to 43 out of 50. Overall, these scores are extremely respectable. The main deficits come from me taking into account people that I would consider to have a 10 out of 10 in a specific category. For example, if Kendaka in the flashback arc has a 10 out of 10 in speed, then Sakamoto would have to be lower, which is why he isn't maxing out all the categories despite being so strong. So yeah, feel free to disagree with me and drop your own scores for Sakamoto in the comments.